Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of 30 Minutes Thursday Tea Time at 3:30. Today you'll hear from a retail heavyweight about how to succeed with innovation and hear his thoughts on technology as a force for good. We'll also hear from two members from our curated portfolio, one delivering increased online revenues around the world and the other delivering happier staff who stay longer and customers who are more satisfied. A quick shout out to our sponsors Investec, Lewis Selkin and Hayes McIntyre. They're genuinely happy to give any friend of Grey Hair Works free advice on wealth management, legal or financial. You just need to ask us for the secret code to unlock their awesomeness. But first, for those of you who don't know who we are, we're more than just a pretty name. We trawl through the flotsam and jetsam of the crap out there to find the jewels which will make a difference to the way a company embraces the digital revolution. By using our vast network of senior contacts, we've been able to put together a curated portfolio of simply spiffing SaaS providers from around the world who will help with everything from your insights and in-housing to first-party data and D2C. If Pepsi use us for solution scouting, shouldn't you do the Pepsi challenge with us too? And it's not just the scouting. We've a team of fabulous grown-ups who know their onions. They've been in big corporates, they solve problems, they've dealt with politics, suffered challenges and learnt the hard way, and still mostly have their own teeth despite their advancing years. All of us are here to help you avoid the pitfalls we've endured in a straightforward, no-nonsense way, which is our trademark. Straightforward and no-nonsense is the perfect description of our guest today. And he still has all his own teeth. Julian Burnett is a digital and innovation titan in the retail space, having been CTO at Sainsburys and John Lewis, before moving on to become CIO and head of business transformation at House of Fraser. He's also an investor and advisor in tech startups, and most recently was IBM's head of retail and the distribution sector. He's currently planning his next move, so I need to be nice to him. Julian, welcome. One of the things I know you're passionate about is open innovation in large companies. It would be great to hear what the lessons are that you've learned and the results you've seen as a result.
Well, thank you. And firstly, thank you for the opportunity to share my thoughts and opinions on this and another couple of topics today. Alex, my experience, I suppose, really does run central to the way in which I take a view of technology in any business, and I'm sometimes find it a struggle to make a distinction between investing in technology, innovating, automating. They sort of all come together in my mind under one primary set of principles, which is that any organization either does or doesn't, and I think there's a question, and you should pose it to yourselves, everybody in the audience, does or doesn't know its winning formula. It does or doesn't know how it makes money, sustainably, profitably. I would hope that most of you will say we kind of understand where we make money, we kind of understand how to improve the way we make money, but our purpose is fulfilled by that winning formula. As businesses get bigger and more complex, it becomes a little bit more difficult to keep that winning formula delivering for you. And it definitely gets more complex for those in bigger businesses to understand what part they play in relation to that winning formula. But my overarching principle of technology is that it's there to support and enable an element of your winning formula. It's there to make it better. It's there to make it bigger. And it's there to make it cheaper to do. And you know, the wonderful quality of technology is that actually you can make it do pretty much anything you want. But the art of innovation is about matching what you want it to do with a problem worth solving, or an opportunity worth taking, or an expansion worth pursuing. And that is where I think the difference comes between organizations which innovate as part of their technology culture and organizations that automate through technology. And in light of a winning formula, there's always the opportunity to apply technology to make things go faster. There's always the opportunity to take human beings out of processes and therefore increase efficiency and potentially reduce cost. But my thesis for innovation, and particularly open innovation in big retail, is that it must be targeted for it to be effective. And I see a very significant difference between open innovation in a targeted way versus research and development. Research and development is something that is focused on a long distant future that might be aligned to a future strategic intent, but it won't necessarily be a pursuit that an organization might do for any other purpose than to explore possibility. With innovation, it's, for me, a practical direction of energy towards solving a problem or exploiting an opportunity or improving the performance of part of your winning formula. Or it's about doing something entirely different. And so for me, there are two categories there of how organizations can focus. One on things that they do that they want to do differently, and one on doing different things. I'd argue the doing different things one is more akin to R&D than it is to innovation. So I like to think that open innovation is about focusing on doing the same things that you do, but doing them differently, doing them in a new way, doing them better, doing them bigger, doing them cheaper, but definitely doing them relative to the improvements that you're seeking through the formula that you know succeeds. And so that's my overarching principle for open innovation. The second principle really is that there is really never such a thing as a bad idea. So long as it's directed through a set of selected priorities that I've just described, gathering as much excitement and insight into how to do those things differently, with or without technology, can be a hugely powerful and potent way of engaging people. Because actually, I think innovation as a cultural principle is about increasing engagement within the organization and increasing awareness of where the priority of the organization sits, and inviting participation in what is important. And so eliciting a volume of ideas around a specific set of priorities that relate to this winning formula from inside the organization actually makes people feel good. It makes them feel listened to, and it makes them feel that their contribution is worthwhile. It's also the best place to go and get the best ideas if you go and ask the people that do things, because a rarefied innovation team sat at the center is highly unlikely to know best where things could be improved at all, unless they go on massive forays into the outside world. It's unlikely. People that do the job tend to know best how it can be improved. And so that's one part of this. The second part is actually, there's no such thing as a bad idea from the outside. And so the open part of innovation is all about eliciting input from as broad a body as you can, but again, channeled into those winning formula priorities that you should be targeting to do better. And, you know, I suppose the argument for that is that we all become quite myopic in our old age. And I'm using that as an analogy for business. The bigger we become, the older we become, the more fixated with what we are and how we are as businesses, the more blinkered we tend to be. We become somewhat convinced that we are really good at this, and overcoming that is actually about listening to alternative viewpoints, listening and allowing yourself the opportunity as an organization to accept that others may do things better. The things that you want to be better at, they already are. And they adopt different technologies that allow them to do that. And so taking input from competitors, comparators that are not directly in your markets, but are comparable to your size, your scale. So competitor insight, comparator insight, and then working with the technology vendor community, big and small, but filtered through those priorities that you've established to be the best place to invest in innovation. And building that body of insight from inside, from outside, filtered through those priorities, will give you a really substantial set of things worth looking at. And from that point forward, I would always advocate you take a look first. Don't try yet. Take a look first, because there's an awful lot, as you've highlighted, as in flotsam and jetsam terms out there. And so take a look through the lens of perhaps some of the other important principles for you as an organization. Do the values of your business align with these providers? Does the roadmap that they're on align with your own longer term view of the world? Are they, commercially sound? Can they envisage a world of working with you?
Yes. Before
you try? Establish that there is that basis upon which you can cooperate. Nothing better and nothing worse than forming a relationship only to find that they're incapable of fulfilling your need. And believe me, big business like Sainsburys or a John Lewis is entirely possible. They will squash you like a little ant when and not even know it.
We've seen many cases of that, but thanks for that. I'm really keen to sort of raise another topic with you while we have a moment. You're a campaigner of tech as a force for good for people with disabilities. I'd love to understand a bit more about your thinking behind that and where you see things are going.
Yeah, well, look, as I say, I've been a huge advocate of using technology to support and enable all people. I think first and foremost, its purpose in many regards is to help people reach their potential inside an organization. I'm an absolute advocate of growth mindset, and that if we support and enable personal growth, then that growth will translate into growth of success in business. But I see we are sort of accelerating at the moment towards, well, we're already firmly in, but we are rapidly increasing in an era of what I describe cognitive technologies. So those which are sort of fueled by robotics and AI, machine learning, analytics. It's moved out of pioneer world into mainstream without us even realizing, and it's been made available through, I guess, the cheap and ubiquitous cloud platforms, through all of the fantastic innovations that are happening through technology. Both, everything that we touch has now got some kind of cognitive capability. It might be robotics, it might be AI, and it's more ubiquitous actually than the mobile phone. And it's present in our homes, in our cars, on our roads, in our schools. Anything and everything that we're doing to some extent now has a level of intelligence attached to the technology that we use. Siri, Alexa, Hey Google, they're all familiar voices in our homes. Certainly Alexa and I have a wonderful relationship every morning. She tells me all about what's happening in the world. She suggests things to me. She also listens in, I'm convinced, because of the things in my Amazon basket that I'm not sure I put there.
Terror story.
This technology has huge positive potential, huge positive potential. It's guiding our shopping choices, our viewing choices, our investment choices. It's got so much to offer us, but what it also has is an environment in which technology has traditionally been considered that is no longer fit for purpose, considering this type of technology. We used to think about technology supporting the the operationalization, the automation, and the scaling of transactional relationships. It used to be data processing. It became a different thing when we set into the future. But this technology actually presents considerable risk where it's placed without the guide rails of perhaps that more traditional evaluation of technology. The explainability of AI in particular is a concern for me. I think there is a risk that there may be harm done to those that are perhaps less able to articulate themselves verbally, visually, or physically, where choices and decisions are being made by technology that hasn't really reflected upon the data that it's acting upon. And I campaign for disability in particular because actually 10 to 15% of the population has a disability. It's a very sizable population, and yet they don't show up in the data.
Listen, this is brilliant, and if anyone wants to sort of continue this discussion afterwards, we'll sort of share further insights. I'm really keen to bring Chris in at this point. One of the things you were talking about was successful companies. Chris is with Signifyd, and for me, that's a perfect definition of a successful company. Chris, over to you.
Thank you very much, Alex, and thank you guys for the opportunity. I think, so, well, let's start off with some good news. Some of you may or may not have heard of Signifyd. It's very kind of you, Alex, to describe us as a successful company. We're incredibly proud of the journey we've been on, which has ultimately manifested itself in us being recognized now as a unicorn business. So going back just over a month ago, we completed a Series E round of funding. We raised another $205 million worth of financing. And we've been, as I say, valued as a unicorn company, valued at 1.4 billion. And what is it that we do? Why are we worth that great sum? Well, we're an e-commerce revenue optimization company that specializes in fraud prevention. And I think e-commerce has never been so relevant or challenging as it is now. The explosion that we've all seen and that we witness within the industry, or even as consumers, has largely been brought about because of the pandemic, but also I think a lot to do with what Julian was mentioning around new technology and innovation. So the opportunity for retail is that we've seen a 50% increase in e-commerce transactions. A third of all retail now within the UK happens online, and yet a third of, or just over 30% of consumers are new to the internet. People who haven't necessarily bought across those channels before, might not be identified by those retailers. And the final stat on this page, 20% of non-UK customers have bought something from a UK retailer. So truly global commerce is here upon us right now. And yet, despite the fact that there's this massive opportunity, that consumers have perhaps unrealistic expectations of digital and the cost of acquisition being really high, retailers are still applying a one-size-fits-all approach. They're still using legacy technology in terms of ignoring regional trends and the dynamic nature of e-commerce. They're applying blanket approaches to how they screen consumers and treat consumers. Those legacy rules and deterministic approaches often mean that good consumers are screened out. The two other points at the bottom, something that we see all the time is that merchants and their tech stack have a very kind of fraud rate bias. So they would rather decline a transaction than take a risk on that. And a lot of that is to do with the notion that the liability for card not present transactions sits with the merchant, when I think respectfully, they would probably agree they don't have the tools, the time, the experience, or even the inclination to know whether there's a good order or not. This stat often people fall off their chair at, right? So globally, across all of e-commerce, fraud is only worth 1% of all of e-commerce. And yet, if we look at the UK and Western Europe, somewhere between 5 and 10% of all transactions are declined because of the fear of fraud. So it's a lot to do with the context I talked about in the previous slide, that merchants are declining transactions just because they don't know. Enter Signifyd. So this is a very typical e-commerce funnel for a merchant prior to the use of our service. Everything that you can see in turquoise blue is an order, a transaction, somebody trying to buy something from you. So for every 100 people that click checkout from a merchant, that merchant in this example is only shipping 86 out of 100 orders. And yet you'll also notice on the right-hand side, the two columns, they still have fraud. So they're still not doing a great job of conversion or managing fraud. Then Signifyd gets involved and two things happen. One, the approval rate and the conversion rate has jumped in this example from 86 to 97%. That's 11% of additional revenue, free money, as Alex and his crew call it. And the second part is that the fraud and abuse chargebacks have gone to zero. That's because of our liability shift. So any order that Signifyd approves on behalf of our merchant, we take the full liability for it. So that's everything, the value of the shipped goods, any taxes, processor fees and penalties, etc. How do we do it? Well, we use machine learning, we use big data across a commerce network of thousands of merchants around the globe to effectively better screen transactions. So it's more breadth and depth of data. And we use probabilistic models instead of deterministic rules and filters. So we're looking for reasons to approve an order. And just because a consumer is new to a particular merchant, they very likely won't be new to us. We will be able to identify them across a number of the data points that you can see here in terms of our screening. And my final slide, just these are some of the brands that we work with. These are some of the enterprise logos. I kind of call this a bit of logo bingo. But I also thought I'd pull out some results that we've delivered on behalf of some European merchants that we've worked with for quite some time. So you can see here, these 4 merchants have seen a significant proportional increase in terms of their approval rate, their conversions, top line revenue through literally the use of better, broader data with more of a conversion focus. Instead of looking for a reason to decline an order, we're helping them approve more.
Brilliant, thanks. Probably only one question today. Julian, over to you.
Yeah, well, I think, well, I'm sure there are plenty of people on the call wondering just how long it takes to get their hands on what sounds like an incredibly compelling thing to have in their armory. Chris, so how long does it take, and how global is the coverage of this? How quickly can somebody be assured of those improvements?
So implementation timeframes vary, Julian, depending on the tech stack that you have in place. So we integrate principally with the e-commerce platform. We have an enterprise API for those larger merchants who want to have a bit more control. That typically takes between 2 and 4 weeks to get live. For some of the mid-market merchants that may be using more of an app-based integration, so like Shopify, BigCommerce, Magento, for example, those can be live same day. That's the benefit of that app infrastructure that they have. So that's a bit around the implementation. The global question, the merchants that you see here are trading around the globe. Literally, we are helping eBay on every single transaction around the world. And the fraud trends are very, very different. The fraud pressure, the trends, the behaviors, even the legislation are very, very different in every market, which is why you need a vendor that can help with those global challenges.
Yeah. Really impressive stuff, actually, Chris. Really.
Thank you.
Now, one of the things you talked about, Julian, was increasing engagement, and off the back of that, perfect moment to bring in Jan from Atobi. Jan, tell us how you can keep the workforce engaged.
Thank you very much, Alex. Just checking my audio here. It's working? Thanks very much. So Chris just told us that in the UK, we see e-commerce has absorbed 35% of all trade. So that's a direct effect of the COVID. Another effect is that we're seeing global retailers needing to deliver great customer experiences. And that's just what we do with Atobi. Atobi is a modular retail excellence app enabling global brands and retailers to manage, motivate, train, monitor all of their thousands of retail staff across multiple locations in many different countries. So we're currently working with Nike, Diesel, Flying Tiger, Copenhagen, Boots, Camper Shoes. Intersport is rolling out Atobi in Europe. And though these logos may seem like very different companies from the outside, they have 2 very big problems in common. So the first is that they have thousands of young store staff manning hundreds or even thousands of locations across the world. And all of these young people, they grew up on TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and Facebook, not on Microsoft or SAP or other great enterprise systems that these global retailers typically use to manage their operations. So these young people just don't like these systems. They don't understand them. They don't want to use them, right? Furthermore, they don't have a PC, they don't have email, and the retailers don't have any way to reach them, train them, and engage them. The second problem, and partly to solve the first problem, is that on a digital transformation journey, retailers are introducing a number of new tools and systems that are not connected. So this actually adds to the first problem, because now these young retail store employees have to navigate another 8 to 10 different systems and apps, and they don't know where to find information. So they opt out just for using Facebook to communicate or Instagram because they understand that. So we solved that, both of these problems, because with Atobi, the headquarter country national offices and store teams, they get one platform to collaborate, train, exchange information, and speed up execution and free up time to deliver great customer experiences, which is exactly what they need, not get lost in systems. So we enable easy, effective communication across the globe and across the different levels in the chain, high engagement, proud and consistent compliance, better customer experiences, and specific sales uplift. So one of the reasons that Atobi works really well is that it's designed for people. People first. We didn't start with an enterprise, let's say logic. We started with the store staff. And then we hired the world's leading expert in gamification. So Atobi is designed to maximize motivation for a number of different motivational styles. And everybody using it get this feeling of accomplishment, higher meaning, empowerment, social influence, and ownership, which is back to you, Julian, what you also said. People really like to feel that their contribution is, let's say, appreciated, right? They like to feel that they grow. This is all what we're about, because when we can make the employees feel better, give them better lives, and feel they grow, they deliver more value to the customers and essentially to the firms. So we're seeing some really solid results. We're seeing 16% productivity improvements on district manager level, 6.4% on store manager level. This saved time translate into higher sales or improved staff cost ratio. We see customer experience improvement measured by NPS on mystery shopping from 55% to 60%. With Nike and Intersport, we have specifically seen on campaign sales an increase in product sales from between 27% to 160% on specific campaign products. And this has been proven across a number of different tests across European countries. So engaging all of the store employees and aligning them around the key organizational objectives really works. So in a nutshell, that's what we're about.
Thanks, Jan. One really quick question from Julian, then I'm afraid that's it, folks.
Yeah, I mean, again, looking just from the inside of an organization like a retailer, where do you get your data from to support this? Yeah, how do you get hold of what you need in terms of KPIs and you know what matters?
We integrate with their POS systems, so we can see all of their, let's say, transactional data, which is where we what is used to set goals for each of the KPIs. So you can set a global goal for hit rate, transaction sizes, or conversion rate, break it down on regions, countries, the district, stores, and even on an individual level, and then set targets for individuals to motivate them to improve. So it requires integration with the POS system, which is fairly easy nowadays.
And the same for the learning and development objectives?
The same thing.
Right.
Yeah, we can integrate with a multitude of HRIS systems or LMS systems, but we have a retail-specific, let's say, micro-learning and micro-action module built into the platform.
Okay, very good.
Brilliant. Listen, guys, thank you very much. Julian, great content. Signifyd, Atobi, as ever, you're awesome. If you've missed one of our previous sessions and would like to access a recording, please just let us know and make a note in your diaries for Thursday, the 15th of July at 3:30, when we'll be joined by Ian Peart, Commercial Director at Pernod Ricard, and two solutions partners. Thanks as ever to our sponsors. Thank you for joining, and look forward to catching up with you in a month's time. All the best.